Boys, another potty. How you doing, Scotty? How's everything going over
Boys.
there? We cut the other potty short and you
hmm
left kind of halfway. So you missed the other half. So we miss you, bro. How you been? You good?
I'm good, man. Yeah, I'm going really well. Just chipping away. I was just speaking to Jan earlier this morning. My family's leaving me in less than 2 weeks, so this time in 2 weeks I'll be back in Oz. But everything's good here. It's just business as usual. I feel like this year's gone a lot quicker. Like I feel like the first part of me being in the UK sort of not dragged, it lingered. I don't know, maybe because I was in prep, but now it just seems like the time's rolling, which is good because I'm just counting down the weeks till I get to see you boys in Bali.
Yeah, it's weird because Australia Day long weekend is coming up, right? So we get a
It's this week.
we
It's
get a
this week,
public
isn't it?
holiday on Friday.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it feels like always after that weekend, that date, it's like, okay, the year's going to steamroll now. Because, like,
hmm
people are still, like, kids are still on school holidays. Some people haven't really gone back to work. And then once that weekend's over, it's like, okay, this year is going to go fast. Like, it's going to get away from us because then it's Feb and all of a sudden we're heading towards the end of the year. So,
Yeah, I know.
are you going to take a little public holiday just because you're Aussie? Just wave your flag and be like, yeah, it's public holiday today, guys. I'm just taking this one off.
It's on Friday, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Friday. Yep, yep.
Yeah, I'd like to, but I don't know that my athletes would take too kindly to that if they didn't get their check-ins. So no, it'll probably just be another day for me. Although technically it'll be your Friday night slash Saturday morning. So, but I'll be living vicariously all through you boys.
We got some good questions. So, actually, a lot of scenarios. So, let's get through to them. But I want to start with
hmm
this one, and it's going to be for you, Scotty, because it revolves around monsters, which I know you're an advocate of, and you kind of got me onto them a little bit. And they
Check
use
this out, just quickly. Have you boys seen this? They got a Lewis
he's got a
Hamilton
monster with
monster
him.
here.
That was not preempted in any way, by the way.
What monster's
No,
that?
I haven't even. I didn't even. For anyone that doesn't know, I haven't even seen the question, so I didn't even know that. But what a coincidence! But how cool does that look? Have you ever had that, MG?
Never seen it in my life, man.
Do you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna try and bring. I'm gonna bring one to Bali for you to try, and hopefully it doesn't burst in my bag. If it does, then
That's
that would be
awesome.
deleterious for many
What
reasons.
flavor
But
is it?
still,
What flavor is it?
it's hard to
What's
explain.
Formula
It's
One flavor, bro?
yeah, it just tastes like I don't
Fast.
know. Yeah,
Speak
fast,
fast.
really fast. No, it's good. It goes down pretty easy. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, let's get stuck into this question. All right, I'm drinking a
hmm
Monster Energy drink every day in the Arvo and wondering how deleterious this may be to my progress. Dieting on 1650 calories, and I can't imagine cutting them out. For context, with caffeine, I have two long blacks in the AM and then a pre-workout in the PM. And I looked up the pre-workout that they specified, and if you take one scoop, it's got 200 milligrams of caffeine. So they're having a
hmm
monster in the Arvo, they're having a pre-workout in the Arvo or in the PM when they work out,
At 520 per day.
and they're having two long blacks in the morning. How deleterious is it of having that much caffeine?
Yeah, as MG said, assuming that the long black, most of them have got about 80 megs, maybe 100 max. So they're having 500 and change milligrams of caffeine. Is it a male or a female?
That's a female.
Female. And do you know what their body weight is?
No idea. No.
Let's say if they're in prep, I don't know, say they're like
Say
60
the
kilo.
60. Yeah, say the 60.
Yeah, I was going to say they're 60 kilograms. You're looking at like around about 9 milligrams per kilo of body weight a day. That is pretty high. Like for context, I'm 95 and change, and I would have maybe 400 a day, and of that, I'd only have a 200 milligram pre-workout as well. So I think the long blacks is no. The way that you would frame it is if it's enhancing your performance because we use caffeine as an ergogenic aid and we know that it delays perception of fatigue, helps to enhance arousal levels. But I think if you're consuming large boluses of caffeine in the afternoon, if it's affecting your sleep, because caffeine does have a half-life on average around 3 to 6 hours, depending on the person. So if she's consuming a lot of that caffeine at the back end of the day, then there's a very good chance that there's still caffeine in the blood throughout the entirety of her sleep, which means that that may be deleterious, to phrase how she put the question, to her sleep and thus recovery adaptation. So if you can't sleep and you're restless and you're not getting any good quality REM sleep and you're waking up 3 or 4 times a night, then that is definitely problematic. But equally, there's some people I know that take like 300 megs at 7 o'clock after a big day on the tools as tradies. And then they'll some of them, if it's a hot night and they've only got a monster in their can, they don't care. They'll drink that on their way home from the gym because they're thirsty, and
Mhm.
they'll go to sleep and sleep for like 8 hours and they're fine. So did she mention any sort of disturbance to sleep?
She didn't. She didn't at all. So yeah, if it's not really affected, if her sleep's not affected, could you say that she can just keep doing what she's doing?
Yeah, I wouldn't have an issue with it, but as you guys know, I'm a big advocate of if you're going to devolume or you were going to deload or even periodically removing caffeine so that you can, I guess, resensitize your stimulus to it because it's like anything. The more you have of something, the more you acclimate to it, and so we need more of it in order to, I guess, elicit that result. But I think something like a Monster is probably more habit than anything. Like if you could have that in the morning, that would probably be better for you because at least that way you're spacing out your caffeine and then maybe you get a little bit more of a response in terms of having that pre-workout later in the evening, and at least that way you've reduced the net amount that's going to be in the blood circulating through most of the PM. But if your sleep is good, then I wouldn't stress too much about it. But that's how I would do it. I would never normally have large amounts of caffeine later in the day because you're putting a stimulant in your body that's trying to basically block melatonin, trying to tell you you don't need to go to sleep when in reality, you're screwing around with your sleep cycle.
Yeah, I think the fact that she mentions her calorie amount, she's assuming that it's quite low, and maybe she's talking about caffeine linked to suppressing her appetite, potentially. I'm just drawing lines, drawing gaps.
Yeah,
Um,
there is some research to say that it helps. We know that caffeine definitely does help, induce lipolysis and obviously it does help with obviously when we're trying to get lean. But I think there's definitely when you're dieting, there's a placebo element that I'm having caffeine, this will keep me going. Like if I was to ask this girl in the morning, if I was to give her decaf long blacks, and then I didn't tell her if it was a blinded, example, and then she went about her day and she's like, "Oh my God, this coffee's just picked me up." Was it really the caffeine or was it just the thought that it was? So sometimes that can be something, and I actually did that at the back end of prep when my sleep was starting to get bad, is I was having a long black. I was having instant coffee, but it was decaf, and it didn't really taste any difference. And it wasn't really that I got a big buzz from, oh my God, I've had caffeine. It was more probably the comfort of I'm having a coffee, and you associate that with it's giving me energy. So maybe she could look at that. But the calorie intake doesn't really have any influence at all.
Yeah, and that's where I was kind of going with why I was saying that is because I know for myself is I swapped to decaf coffee also late
Hmm.
in the day. It still like suppressed my hunger per se, but it wasn't affecting my sleep. So I tell a lot of clients swap out to decaf, especially if you're having it late in the day, but you still feel you need it to suppress your appetite, but it won't affect your sleep. But I was also going to say too is maybe just look at the structure of your diet, and if you see there's anything in there that can help with your hunger. If you are having caffeine for hunger related issues, make sure you volumize your food, spread it out equally, those kind of things. So
Yeah, and I think fiber distribution plays a big part in that because I think although, you go back to the debate like, it's energy in versus energy out, yeah, to an extent, but in terms of managing hunger, where you allocate certain substrates makes a difference in terms of, satiation. It makes a difference in terms of getting the nutrients into the blood at the rate at which you need them and when you need them. So like if you're gonna do a workout at 11 a.m. in the morning, even though you might be ravenously hungry at 9 a.m., you're not going to have shitloads of vegetables and fiber because it's just going to sit in your gut versus you could have something, once you start training, you're not probably going to be thinking about being hungry. But later in the day, in the afternoon, maybe your lunch meal, you've got like 300 or 400 grams of vegetables. And as a result of that, you get that sensation of feeling, full. But equally, as we've said numerous times, there comes a point where you just have to accept that you're going to be hungry. It doesn't matter how much you're eating, the volume, the energy intake, you're going to feel hungry. And that's just a signaling issue. You can't do anything about that.
yeah, definitely. All right, let's move into another scenario. So in my last prep, I was ready super early, 3 kgs off stage weight, 14 weeks out, female fitness category. Do you think it's detrimental? I'm going to swap that to deleterious to someone's health if they are too lean too early. I still haven't gotten my cycle back after 1.5 years. So being too lean too early, she was 3 kg off her stage weight, 14 weeks out.
Look, it's a tough one because for the most part, let's look at it from a few different aspects. For the most part, so many athletes just don't come in tight enough, right? So if this is your first time prepping, I put the scenario to you like this. Would you rather be the one who's 3 kilos off stage weight 14 weeks out or be 3 kilos or 4 kilos off stage week 2 weeks out. I think if I had the choice, I'd pick the first one, as an athlete and, probably as a coach too. Ultimately, when you're that close to stage weight, that far out, there's plenty of things you can still do. Right? It's not to say that you have to keep pushing the diet as hard as you've pushed it for the last 14 weeks. There's many avenues that, you and your coach can potentially employ. Things like, diet breaks. You can slow the rate of loss. You can pull things back a little bit, or as we call it, giving back to the system. So, I would like to know a little bit more about, how experienced or what prep this was for this athlete, whether it was their first prep or not. Ultimately, sometimes being lean for too long can have some downside, right? And sometimes, the physique just isn't able to bounce back and come back to life, which we've seen many, many times with athletes. But yes, being too lean for too long, and depends at what level of condition you are. And, if it's female fitness, assuming that you got pretty shredded, I certainly wouldn't want to be holding stage lean level condition for too long as a female athlete for obvious reasons, hormone health and things like that. But I also think that 3 kilos off 14 weeks out doesn't sound ridiculous either.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Scotty?
Yeah, I think context is important. I don't think that's alarmingly ready too early at all. I've got one of my fitness and a physique guy that are right around that mark, and they're probably the same. I think it's, what is it, like 13 weeks out or something like that. But equally, like, what was her starting weight? And context is important, because if I'm 60 kilos and it's like, okay, well, my stage weight is going to be 52 and I'm 3 kilos off stage weight, then it's like, well, when you look at the actual rate of loss throughout the prep, it's not really that assertive and that aggressive. So I think you need to look at that. But also, you should be able to look at the longitudinal periodization. If you're concerned with that, obviously this is done and dusted now, but equally you should be having conversations, and your coach should be explaining the plan of attack. Okay, this is where we think we're going to need to land, and this is where we're starting. So let's say that we need to lose, I don't know, whatever it was, 12 kilos. So say that she did have to lose 12 and that she's 75% of the way there. And then in the last 14 weeks, she's got another 3 kilos to go. Let's say there might be 2 weeks there where maybe you're trialing a peak week intervention in terms of how you're going to manage things. So you lose 2 weeks of dieting, you lose peak week. Okay, so there's 3. So now you've got 11 weeks to pull off 300 grams. Bearing in mind that as we get closer to stage, the rate of loss is going to be smaller because the risk of degrading lean mass increases drastically. So when you look at it on those terms, and if she is 60 kilos, you're looking at around about 0.5% of body weight per week of an ROL target. And that's more than within the parameters, I think, especially if you're looking to go into female fitness and compete at the top level. You've got to get inside out peeled. The conditioning requirements are getting higher and higher. So I think that's important, but you should have an understanding as an athlete with what the plan is. Like, this is where we want to be at this stage, and this is why that is. Now, is there a trade-off? Yes, some people can live being in a lower body composition than others, because we see changes to, firstly, obviously hunger, which is inevitable, but changes in sex hormones, our endocrinology changes, we become a lot more irritable, perception of energy availability is down. So there's all these negative, perturbations that come with living in that condition. But equally, there are tools that we have to help manage and mitigate that. But then the trade-off is, okay, well, if you were to be 5 kilos and you had to push that rate of loss more aggressively, then the risk of losing more quality tissue increases. And then you've got to weigh up that. What's the physique like? If you have, say you had, let's use Evan as an example, who has an enormous amount of muscle. And I actually used her as an example where I had to dig her right to the end because we didn't have enough time. The trade-off for that is you are risking potentially degrading lean mass, but her physique has enough tissue for me to be able to, that's a worthy trade-off. That's some recoil that I'm willing to accept if that happens. But if I had someone that was more of an ectomorph and potentially didn't have the same amount of tissue, is it really worth running that risk and giving that up? Because then we're losing some much needed tissue to be competitive. So they're things that you need to factor in. And in terms of the menstrual cycle not returning, I don't necessarily think that's just as a result of you being ready too early. Perhaps you didn't regain enough quick enough concluding the contest prep. So, and that is, like, we could talk about that for hours on end, because athletes don't want to perhaps regain what they need to. We become married to a certain look, but the leaner that you get and the longer that you stay in that condition, it's not unrealistic for you to expect your cycle to come back longer, but it just enhances the need that you need to get out of that condition ASAP as soon as prep's done. we say you got to get in and then you got to get out, because it's going to take time for you to feel normal. And I've had one of my athletes in the year of COVID who, and I competed in that year as well, she was ready probably 20 plus weeks early, but that was just the way that it was. And it took her over a year for her cycle to come back. But equally, it's not unrealistic for that to happen when you think about she'd been dieting for really a year and she'd been super lean. So it just took that time for her body to trust her. So there's always going to be caveats to that. And I think you just have to weigh out what's important versus what's not. But one of the biggest things that there should always be between athlete and coach is an open dialogue. And you should always be able to be transparent and understand this is the plan. Because if you're just being a soldier and you don't understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, then you don't really learn, and perhaps, you wouldn't have to ask this question.
Yeah, everything that you mentioned are all great points. Just one thing I wanted to add was, if it was a normal prep, so it was a 25, 26, 28 week prep, where that may be for typical prep for female fitness, and you got ready early, my concern would be maybe you lost too much too fast in the first phase, and maybe you might have lost some muscle mass there. Because ideally, if you've got that length of time and the coach put an appropriate time frame for your prep and they had a correct rate of loss, you shouldn't be ready that early unless it was too aggressive and you lost too much too fast. And that's what I'd be more concerned about. What happened there? Why were you ready so early? Did you lose muscle mass during that time because it was aggressive, and all of a sudden we found ourselves we're halfway through prep, but we're only 3 kilos above stage weight? So that was just one thing I just wanted to add. I'd like to know the whole length of the prep and what was
the starting weight.
Yeah, what was the rate of loss, and were you far exceeding that rate of loss? And that's where the issue would be for sure. All right, let's move on to a different one. So currently training for Season A ICN, but I feel like my coach is overtraining me and doing the wrong type of training. I do 2 to 3 endurance/cardio sessions a day and barely any heavy weightlifting. How often do your athletes train, and what type of workouts do they do? So she's doing 2 to 3 endurance cardio sessions a day and barely any heavy weights.
What would be defined as an endurance session? Because to me,
Doesn't
endurance,
really
you're
say,
working
but
within, say 60% of max heart rate or VO2 max. Versus, Does that mean like you're doing 90 minutes? You're doing 4 hours?
Yeah. Well, let's just take an educated guess. Let's just say it's what we would prescribe as an endurance cardio session. Maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's 20 minutes, right? Would you ever give that to an athlete 3 times a day?
No,
There's just no need to.
I think there's some other
repeat it.
alarm bells first. If you're prepping for a bodybuilding show and you're not lifting any heavy weights,
Yeah.
so I mean, again, without context, to say that 2 to 3 endurance sessions are wrong. I don't think any of us on screen have ever prescribed 3 endurance sessions, or even has anyone ever prescribed 3 cardio sessions in a day? I've never even done that.
No.
So pretty much everything that you've said seems to be an issue. Ultimately, think about the sport that you're competing in. It's a complete misalignment to think that you're going to prep for a show that's about muscle and do nothing that's, conducive with building muscle or retaining muscle, which is, lifting heavy weights and what we always talk about on this show, which is getting uncomfortable and pushing intensity in the gym. So that's an issue. It sounds like maybe you've started from a place that was a little bit further back, and, you've got a fair amount of body fat to lose across the journey. So the coach's mindset or methodology is, let's just burn as many calories as we can and lose as much fat as we can. That's not a good plan. And, even if you do lose a ton of weight, I think there's going to be a lot of downsides at the end of it. One, what is that end physique going to look like? I feel like it's not going to have the muscle on it that either of you hope there is, unless you're someone who is genetically gifted and is starting from a position where you've got so much muscle mass that you do not need to lift any heavy weights, which I can't think of anyone that would fall into that category. This plan sounds terrible.
What do you think, Scotty?
It sounds like what MG alluded to. I think perhaps there's quite a lot of fat loss that needs to take place, perhaps not starting the prep from the position that would have been most optimal. But equally, it's one thing to lose body fat, but if you haven't got any quality tissue underneath, you're just going to look sort of out of place. And equally, I probably need to be careful how you answer it, because the last thing I want to do is shadow whoever this person is. I'm sure she's putting in, it's a female, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, putting in a ton of work, working hard. And this is the thing, you put your trust in a coach. I think if you're asking these questions here, you should be having that same conversation. There's nothing wrong with asking your coach Why? We as coaches, practitioners, I always encourage my athletes, if you're not sure or if you have any questions, it's literally how I sign out every check-in, feel free to reach out because that's how you learn, which actually makes our job easier if your training and your nutritional literacy is improving. So I think you should probably have a conversation and perhaps ask, why am I doing this and I'm not lifting weights? But even the way it's phrased, an endurance-based cardio session. So I would never prescribe, you're usually giving an intensity or a specific required amount of energy expenditure that you want to see. There's usually a time component, and that's usually it. When I think endurance, I'm thinking about perhaps someone who's training for an Ironman or something of that sort of nature, or a cyclist. But I think perhaps the style of which you're training, it's not individualized and it's not really context specific to the sport of bodybuilding. If you're in a bodybuilding comp, you'd be training at least 4 times a week. Is cardio important to fat loss? Yeah, for sure. It definitely has its place. But equally, 3 times a day, there's no benefit splitting it up versus if you were to just do it all in the morning. Sometimes I know people who will do morning and night because it fits their lifestyle better, but there's no need to do it 3 times a day. You probably just need to have that honest conversation with your coach. And perhaps if it's not where you want to be, there's still a long time till season A. If you're not happy and if it's your first prep's such an important prep because it's ultimately going to determine whether you stay or you leave the sport and the experience that you have. And it should be an awesome and a phenomenal experience. And there's nothing wrong. We see it all the time. Saw one of your athletes, I think yesterday, MG put up that they bailed on their first prep, but they've had such a better experience the second time around. It's very, very, very common. And equally, I'm not saying that this person should leave their coach or quit their prep, but sometimes if you make a better decision looking further down the track, I'm not in the right spot. I've learned a lot of what I shouldn't do. So I'm going to reset, regroup, and then I'm going to go again. And this time when I go again, I'm going to make sure that this is right, that's right. If you're staying with the same coach, great, but maybe you guys are able to devise a better strategy that helps you get to where you want to get to in a way that's going to be more optimal in terms of experience, results, and not spending your whole life at the gym.
Yeah, I love what you said at the end there, Scotty, about making sure that this is an enjoyable journey, that once you get through the show, you actually want to continue to compete and not just be done and dust with this sport because you had a bad experience. Maybe there's different methodologies that should have been used within your prep, or maybe you didn't start in the best position and you've had to use things like this that maybe are good for fat loss but aren't the best for muscle gain or retention, which is obviously it's a bodybuilding show, so we do need to show shape and muscle mass in the physique. So that's the key part of this, I think, Scotty, and also just making sure you communicate to your coach everything that you're feeling. Back to the cardio, maybe this person used the word endurance because the cardio is long, like it's a long cardio session. I'm just guessing, I'm just trying to understand. Yeah, maybe she's using the word endurance because the cardio is long. It's long in duration.
Just on that, if anyone's ever asking these sort of questions, as you can kind of tell, sometimes, and I know we probably allude to it a lot, is just context. So the more, I guess, specific for some of these things, the way you can kind of phrase them, it will probably help us to be able to articulate and give you a better response in terms of perhaps relevance and context.
Yeah. Okay, next one. Should I mini cut if I still haven't got my period back from season B? We kind of see this, right? And we've done a podcast about this a long time ago, is maybe people not being super successful in their reverse. They put a little bit too much body fat on too quickly, and now they're uncomfortable. And what they want to do is they want to mini cut. They want to take that fluff off that they've put on unnecessarily. And the problem is your physical health and also maybe your metabolic health hasn't caught up yet. And you're not in a position to go into a mini cut. And if you do, you'll probably fail and then feel even worse, or you won't get the fat loss that you want, or you have to dig to a position that is unhealthy with the level of cardio and calories that maybe you need to go to. But I would say is, what's your composition look like? What amount of calories are you on? Are they the highest you've been on in the off season? Are you at an appropriate body weight? Are you just mini cutting because maybe you have an occasion or a wedding or something? Or are you mini cutting because you put body fat on too quickly and you're uncomfortable and now you want to kind of undo some of the mess that you're in? So, Scotty, what do you think? Mini cutting, and it's only just been season B, it's just passed. They haven't got their cycle back. What would you suggest?
Yeah, definitely not. So firstly, one of the ways to identify where you're at would be, and hopefully a lot of athletes are starting to do this, is going and getting a blood panel. So get your bloods done and have a look. And at least that way you have some quantitative metrics to see where your estradiol levels are, to see where testosterone is, to see where all of these sex hormones are. And then based on that, you might be like, oh, I feel really, really good. But it's like, well, your physiology is telling us a completely different story. And sometimes you may have not had the recovery phase that you want post prep. It didn't go the way, you've gotten a bit soft and a bit fluffy. It's one of those things. Sometimes it doesn't always go to plan. Perhaps it's your first prep and you didn't manage it right. That's okay. You'll learn from it. But equally, as a coach slash a practitioner, there's a responsibility above your bodybuilding endeavors to get you back and put you on the other side of the fence to be a healthy female human being again. Like, you may not be able to see past the next year, 2 years. You may want to have kids in the next 3 years, but you make a bad decision and you continue to take from the system when you haven't recovered. It's just going to elongate how long it's going to take for you to get your cycle back, which may mean that instead of you competing in 2025, now it's 2026, 2027, because you didn't get your cycle back for 2 years because you just didn't let your body feel safe and feel comfortable. So I would want to see bloods. I would also want to assess what is your energy availability in terms of the amount of calories per kilo of lean mass once expenditure has been accounted for. And if you're not knocking on the door of at least 40, maybe even closer to 45, then it may mean that you have to sacrifice being a bit softer and gaining a little bit more weight, but more or less just hanging out and giving your body the time. So definitely don't, or I don't recommend that you would enter a fat loss phase, and hopefully your coach is in agreement with you on that. And if you are looking after your own off season, then I think that it would be worthy having a consult with someone that knows what they're doing to give you some of the reasons why, and also to explain and dilute it so you understand it. Because sometimes we just need someone to get us out of our own way. And equally, I get it. It's summer, you're at the beach, maybe you don't feel as comfortable, but in another 8 weeks' time, when the weather's a bit cooler and you're covered up, it won't really matter. And then for the sake of it, I would just say embrace it. Don't focus on what your physique looks like. You shouldn't just be married to that. Focus on being a bit heavier. What does that allow you to do? Greater energy availability, what you can do in the gym, and channel your energy towards that and trying to rebuild on your physique. Because if the likelihood is you won't have gained much muscle since you finished prep. And if you waste another 6-8 weeks trying to diet again, you've just wasted virtually the first half of your improvement season focusing on getting lean when your next stage showing isn't going to represent any improvement.
Mhm.
So I think you need to look at it more from a longitudinal perspective, and hopefully, and this is why we speak about it's important to have someone, even if you don't check in with them every week, but someone to maybe oversee the bigger picture so that you have some direction and you don't just waste the improvement season between, okay, I'm bulking for a bit, now I'm cutting, I'm bulking, I'm cutting. You should want to diet as infrequently as possible if you want to bodybuild.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that's the reason why she's asking this question, and we're giving her the bigger picture, so we're helping her out. So hopefully this does
Yep.
really help her out. MG, do you have any feedback on that? Do you ever find yourself in a scenario where people are asking for this and you have to be the
Yep.
bad guy, the party pooper sometimes?
Oh man, a handful of times just after last season alone. Starting with a couple of new athletes who wanted to go again, and I said, no, we're not going to do that. There's so many things that we need to get right first. And one of the things that happens, and I'm sure you guys experience with this too, is you'll start with someone, or it'll be one of your own athletes who's existing, that'll go through 4 or 5 months will go past. They'll just get their monthly cycle back on that next check-in. They're like, oh, can we do a Minicut now? And it's like, no, we just got through the hard bit, and the first thing that you want to do is put yourself right back in the hole. It's like, no, absolutely not. We now need to hold this position for an extended amount of time. Like, it's not even in the short future. Like, the last thing I want to do is put you into a Minicut the week that you get your cycle back after 7 months of not having it. But people ask all the time. It's like no, we need to hold this now. So I just think the message is be patient. When you do get back to better health markers, hold those health markers for a while. Don't be in a rush to get in and get out. Scott always talks about, being stage lean as something to get in and get out. But I think holding good health should be something that we should hold for long periods of time, for longevity, for mental health, for so many reasons, as well as just actually being able to genuinely improve, because so many things in off season are so much better for you. But I think people are just so keen to get out of a fluffy state the second they get into it.
And also, what's to say that they do the mini cut and then they gain that fluff back, all of it, and then some? Now you're in an even worse position. So,
And if you have regained a lot in those initial phases, the likelihood is that you've had some issues with adherence and potentially your relationship towards food. And so that also takes some time to settle that down and for that hunger signaling to be at peace again. And so you may potentially just reawaken all of that, and then you diet for 4 or 5 weeks, and then you have a blowout, and it's like you completely undo all of that. And it's like, well, we just wasted 3 months and your health is worse. You look no different. Performance isn't very good. When if you just took the time to, again, just embrace your body for what it can do and don't just stress all the time around how it looks, doesn't define who you are, or the scale weight number doesn't define who you are. It's just a metric of assessment.
Okay, next one. Benefits of working with an online coach in an extended off season. For someone that's needing to build, would it be better to have face-to-face sessions to focus on training performance as opposed to just being giving a plan and being executing? So I think there's 2 parts to this question. Is it good to have a coach in the off season? And then what type of coach should you have during that time? Should you have someone that you need to see face to face, or is just someone that is just coaching you on lines, giving you a plan and making sure that you execute and stay adherent? Is that the best option? I think 2 things. Short answer: having a coach is always going to outweigh not having a coach for sure. So that's the answer to that one. Whether you need face-to-face sessions or not, and it says to focus on training performance. Maybe you do. Like, if you're not training hard enough, not with intensity, and maybe you need a coach or a face-to-face trainer to really push you to see where your limits are so you can recalibrate what intensity really is. But if there's also things that you need to correct within your form, within your training, activation, maybe you always have an issue not growing your glutes or your lats or your shoulders, and you need someone there to kind of push you through, but also see how you execute training and exercises, that's a good idea too. So I think you have to, firstly, yes, coach is always going to be beneficial. Whether it needs to be online or not is really a decision that you need to make yourself, truly assessing what you think your needs are. Some people are good to go. They don't need to see anyone face to face. They're motivated. They know how to train with intensity. They know how to execute all their lifts with great form, mind muscle connection, and just having an online coach is good enough for them. What do you think, MG? A coach in the off season? Yes, no. And should it be face to face? Yes, no.
Yeah, I think a coach in the off season should be just as high priority as having a coach in comp prep. And I think for the most part, which I think we've said on this podcast before, is for most people, off season's just too underutilized. Maybe that's not a good word, but people just don't put enough emphasis on the off season. And I think, when you take a little bit of added flexibility, adherence goes down for the most part. And I think for those people that had, a coach looking after their off season that normally take care of it on their own, I think they could get a very, very great benefit. And I think a lot of months can be wasted really easily in off season. Time can fly by faster than a lot of people think. And I think if you're taking this seriously, if you want to improve, if you want to compete again and have a better package, or you just want to make sure that you're always getting better, you should 100% have a coach in the off season, because that's when all those great gains are made. And if you don't have someone overseeing that, like I said, time can fly past really quickly, and all of a sudden you're 6 months down the track and you've made minimal gains. You haven't progressed. You're not stronger. You're wrecked. You're starting to feel niggles and injuries. It's because you haven't been able to look at things objectively or analytically, and tell yourself when the right time was for a deload. You haven't been within 2% of your nutritional targets because you've just had too many off-track meals, because no one's there overseeing it and reminding you of how important it is. So I think a coach in the off-season is a must. Face-to-face can be a great benefit. Again, it's individualized. Ultimately, I've got some people who dominate in the gym on their own, and when I do a face-to-face with them, the results are pretty similar. And then I've got a lot more people that when I face-to-face them, the numbers we get far exceed what they get on their own. So I definitely think face-to-face has a place. It's no secret that it's going to be far more expensive to have face-to-face sessions. If you look at, most reasonable face-to-face coaches, you'll pay an online coaching fee, and then, anywhere from sort of $70 to $90 as an average for a 45 to 60 minute session. So it can get expensive. But, if you're someone who's not sure if you can get a little bit more, you haven't had a face-to-face session for a while, maybe it's worth reaching out to your coach and saying, hey, can we do this day? What's your toughest day? It's my leg day or it's my push day. Hey, let's do that day together. If you're able to find a little bit extra on every single exercise, maybe it's worth doing every now and then just to test yourself and get a little bit more uncomfortable. So then you've got a new benchmark to take back to your own training and use as something to aim for.
Awesome. What do you think, Scotty?
Yeah, everything MG said is spot on. I agree with. I think all those questions that we answered in the first portion of this podcast probably reinforce the need and perhaps the benefit of having someone in your corner to oversee things, not just, in an acute setting, but looking at things from a longitudinal. Maybe you don't want to get on stage till 2026. Well, how do you plan all of that and reverse engineer it? What does that look like so that you can look at things more phasically rather than looking 1 week at a time ahead? Someone who can see the whole playing field rather than just looking at a certain position. And then with face-to-face, all those points that MG made a spot on. I think as well, training intensity and learning to train hard, it's a skill. It's something that not everyone possesses. And so I think even if you are someone who trains hard, there's benefit to training with people who maybe are where you want to be or train harder than you do, just as a nice recalibrator. I thought I was training hard. I can definitely train harder. But equally, it is something that if you want to be successful in this sport, if you're always reliant on someone to push you, you're probably going to have a limited ceiling unless you're in a very, very good position financially where you can pay, MG $600 a week and he's going to be with you for every session. He's going to make sure that you push the limits every single time. But otherwise, I think for the most part, it's definitely something that if you can afford to do it from a week to week, if it's one session or if it's fortnightly, for sure. But it is definitely a skill that's something that if you want to be successful in this space, you have to learn how to train hard and you have to be able to embrace, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. Because if you can't, then like I said, that ceiling in terms of your progression, it's definitely going to be limited.
Definitely. All right, let's move on to a nutrition-related question. It says top 5 to 6 food swaps you would make if your calories are getting low. So it doesn't have to be top 5 or 6, but like what are some of food swaps that you would make if you're like, okay, calories are getting a bit low, I'm going to swap something out. I know, MG, you're never going to take out pineapple, right? So that's staying in there. But what are some things that, and you're pretty good with this, MG, like what are some things that you did in your prep that you're like, all right, that needs to go. I'm going to swap it with this, and this is going to, allow me to go on those lower calories I need to be on, but it's still going to give me that food volume or, that satisfaction that I need.
Yeah. So what I do if I'm like building a day of eating with an athlete, I've got little things that I use regularly. Like for most people, they like to have omelets, and I always start a prep utilizing things like bagels, right, or low carb bagels, because I know that 35-gram carb bagel, when I need to, I can swap it over for a wholemeal English muffin that'll take my carbs from 36 down to 19. So like, there's definitely, that's not an exact swap. You're talking about a bagel for a muffin, but in the context of that meal where you're toasting a bagel cut in half or a muffin cut in half, it's similar, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's just about having, pieces of food that can be subbed out for another that leaves the similarity of the meal, as it was. Vegetables are obviously a great one too, just from a volume perspective. And I do utilize fruit as well. Things like berries, are a great low calorie option. You actually intrigued me your last prep, man, when you were eating some canned fruit. And then I hadn't utilized that before, and I just jumped in the supermarket while you were prepping. I grabbed the back of the can. I was like, holy shit. I had no idea how much canned fruit you get in terms of volume for such a small amount of calories. So you do definitely get a lot better as you go through preps. But I don't tend to personally change things too much, not for myself or for my athletes going through prep. I've got a couple of small swaps that I've mentioned. But for the most part, I'm happy to just chop down the sizes of meals, start at the highest point and gradually decrease them as I go. I went through a prep once, which you'll remember, MT, in my very, very early days of competing, maybe back in 2017. And remember, I was getting super creative with my macros. I was having, egg white pizzas, and I was having, zucchini oats to get a huge bowl of oats. And man, it just ran me into a problem. All of a sudden, every meal had to be huge. The volume had to be huge. I was having salads like in bowls the size of my whole torso, and it was only like 500 calories. And eventually that ran me into a problem because a normal small meal just wouldn't suffice anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself having to need massive, massive volume meals. So post that, I stopped doing that and I just started eating, normal size meals. And, if I was hungry, I was hungry. And that was just the way it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just like if I just think about when I moved from off season into prep and even the depths of prep, like how do my meals change? Because I eat very similar off season to prep, but definitely some components change. So if we're talking about lunches and dinners, in off season there'll be rice, then it'll go down to maybe a spud light or a potato, then it'll go down to pumpkin, and then it will go down to the lowest, maybe just zucchini only, or just broccoli, or just the most volume vegetables, which the least amount of calories. As for like what you mentioned about fruit, some people might start at a banana and then work their way down to like berries because they're the lowest calorie for the volume you get. I know for breakfast, as you said, you might have like a muffin or a bagel, but then eventually you go down to just having an omelette only. There's no carbohydrate in there. So I know they're the kind of steps that I was taking. And then even condiments, like in off season, I might have like a teriyaki sauce or something like that. And then in prep, I'll move to like mustard because it's got like a lot less calories. So there's things that you kind of step down to as your calories get a little bit lower, so you can still have the meal still have a decent amount of volume in there, but you're starting to cut calories away. How about you, Scotty? I feel it's a funny question to ask you because like your calories are always pretty decent, but I'm sure you do have some swaps, right? So what are some of the things that you swap as you come down?
Yeah, I am fortunate I can diet on a bit more food, but equally, as I said, the hunger's still there when you're inside out condition. But I don't, other than the main ones that you just said, the only thing that really changes for me at all is just rice will go to charisma potato, and that's really really it. Even when I have people now sometimes ask, "Oh, where's your food at now? You haven't done a physique update. How much are you eating?" I eat exactly the same thing every single day. So I don't even use my fitness pal anymore because it doesn't change
Yeah.
unless maybe some of the meat was eaten that I was going to have and I've just got to quickly sub something out. But equally, I can normally just do that in my head. So that would pretty much be the only thing. There might be a meal that would once upon a time it might have had some cereal and then it doesn't have cereal. Or when I was in Oz, because I had to swap my food slightly here because it was a little bit different to what I could get in the UK. But I used to have like egg white omelets with a heap of veggies, and not necessarily because it would just because I needed something to keep me feeling full, it just help hit the micronutrient targets that I needed. And in the first block of prep, I would have that with 3 bits of gluten-free toast. Whereas when I was at the back end, I was just having 1 bit of gluten-free toast. So I would just make one like a sandwich. I would just literally eat it open-handed. And the other one, I would just eat the rest of the omelet. And then that was really the only thing that changed. Otherwise, rice was in there till pretty much the end. But I actually like potatoes, charisma's the taste of them anyway. So, and I would be like, I'd rather be having more carbohydrate in the periods of time throughout the day when I need it, rather than being like, I've never been one to, I'm going to save 120 grams so I can have this at dinner. Just don't really care about that enough. It's more like I'd rather have that carbohydrate in meal one, meal two, because that's when I need it before I train, and then a little bit afterwards. And then the rest of it, I'd have more of my fats and my fiber and whatnot. So I think that's the biggest thing. You want to set up a system and that's why, again, having a coach is good, because if you can put something in place from week one of prep that allows you to not have to be like, now I'm going to swap that for that. You just be like, all right, I don't really need to maybe change two or three things.
Mhm.
The other thing is it gives you scale weight data more correlative power to body composition change as well, because you're not swapping in, say you were having rice or you're having potato and then you decide to have a shitload of broccoli and cauliflower, a cruciferous type vegetable that may allow you to feel full, but also is going to ferment and sit in the large intestine and leave you feeling bloated and may screw your scale weight for like a week on end. So I think you want to keep things as simplistic as possible. And the less that you focus on that, I believe the less food focus you'll end up having.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really good point is if we could just literally have the same thing every day throughout the whole of the prep, making small modifications along the way, like doing some of those small swaps that we said, but really 80% of the food is exactly the same, you're
Mhm.
going to have way better data. It's going to be way more stable that you can make minor adjustments. Like we're talking, okay, you're going to drop 50 calories this week out of your food and you can see the reaction. But if you keep doing different things every single day, you've got more chance of error, more chance of fluctuation, and you won't be able to see when you do want to make a small change, whether it's working or not. So yeah, trying to be robotic with your food definitely helps. It definitely does help.
And that means switching off and accepting that you're going to be hungry. Like when people and athletes, if they're ever complaining to me in their check-ins, "Oh, I'm so hungry," I'll use an example. It's like you are dieting for a bodybuilding show, you need to get shredded. That's like you saying I went and had a 50-degree sauna and I was fucking sweating like after being in there for 2 minutes. I just can't work this thing out. Well, of course you are. You're in a sauna. It's the same thing when you're in an energy deficit. Like this is it's an outcome. It's something that's going to occur. So the less time you spend on focusing on it and the more times you just focus on just keeping things as simplistic as possible, the better it will be. And like we said, the better the data is going to be as well.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's finish off on a couple of quicker questions, and they're focused around us boys. So let's get into it. When was the last time you guys went out to a nightclub? Scott, I want to know your answer, Scotty.
Jesus, I don't. It'd be like, oh, 12 years maybe? I don't know. It's a long, long time. I've been to pubs and stuff with like mates, like after the footy and the cricket and things like that, but I don't think I've been to a club. It wouldn't be before I was with Jen. So yeah, before 2012, I think.
Wow. UMG, last time I went to a nightclub?
Man, you were there. Do you remember when Maeve and I got together in the early days? I can't remember which nightclub it was or where we were, but that one.
It was the old Long Room.
Yeah, that was about what, 6 years ago?
2017? 20.
Anyway, that one.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah. Wow.
That was the last time.
What about you, MC?
He went on a boys trip to freaking.
Oh yeah, you went to
man.
Thailand. That was like what, 4 weeks ago, bro.
when I went to Vietnam. Yeah.
Yeah, he went to Vietnam, yeah.
In September last year.
Him, Alex, and Drew were sending it.
Yeah. Do you three boys know where flies sleep?
It's a good fucking question.
Okay. Scotty, come on, you're the brains here, mate.
If anyone's going to know, it's Scott. Do flies sleep?
I don't have an answer for that, bro. I'm not too sure.
I don't either.
And I'm going to do the Joe Rogan and just look it up while you're.
You're going to Google it? All right, you can Google it. And while we go to the next question, do you have any beef with anyone else in the industry? Scotty, got any beef with anyone in the industry?
No, not that I know of. Someone might have beef with me. I don't know, but I don't have any beef with anyone.
So not the blog, but they might have beef with me. I got no idea. Maybe we're occupying some space in their head at the moment, but yeah, it's not the other way around.
Yeah, I don't know. Don't think so.
Do you have any plans for more retreats or other business-related events this year or next? Scotty?
Yeah, we do.
That's the answer. Yes. That's a good. Yes.
Do we elaborate or we just keep everything?
Yes.
Look, we're definitely going to run more retreats for sure because we had so much interest and we didn't even advertise it really. We literally spoke about it on the podcast and we sent the email out to our existing clients and then spots filled up. So once people started to get traction about it, spots are already filled. So we definitely...
The second one, we actually have I have the date for that now because that's pretty much all.
Yeah.
We don't want to do that yet.
Yeah, we've got another one lined up. It's late in the year. Yeah, we do have another one lined up, but we're to get through this one first and then we'll advertise the next one. Yeah.
Guys, the best answer I can give you is somewhere dark is where they sleep.
Okay.
Somewhere dark. It's the best I can give you.
You know, I haven't seen one fly since I've been in the UK. I was thinking about that the other night. I haven't seen any flies. Obviously, it's freezing fucking cold.
There's fucking three in this room.
Yeah, it's hot.
And no mosquitoes. I reckon they'd be all over the joint there, MG.
Yeah, they're bad.
At night,
Yeah.
they rest principally on ceilings, electric wires, and dangling light cords. That is the official answer. That's where they
So
sleep.
they're sleeping. They're sleeping there.
Ceiling,
Okay.
Ceilings, electric wires, and dangling light cords indoors, preferably.
Oh, wow. Okay. There you go. Learn something new every day. Okay, last one.
Yep.
Best tip for starting to grow your client base in your PT business. Give us one tip, MG, of how to grow your client base.
Social proof.
Mm.
Take on everyone and make sure you show it on your on whatever your advertising platform is, social media or website. Put as much evidence on there as possible. So if anyone gets referred to you and looks you up, they can look at you and go, yeah, this person knows what they're doing. Without any of that, it's really hard to grow.
Scotty?
Focus on the clients that you do have as opposed to the clients that you're trying to acquire. So if you put all of your time and attention into ensuring that they get not only the best experience with you as a trainer, but equally that their goals are your goals. And when you have that same process it's imperative that they achieve that goal. Obviously, if they get to where they need to get to, then the results will show both in whatever their endeavors are, but also in their physique. And that is going to be your best form of marketing because they'll be everywhere they go, they'll be representing you.
It's a good one. It definitely plays off MGs. It goes hand in hand. If you work on your current clients and you get results for them, then you present those results to the public and you show everyone what you're doing and you add value. Those tips work hand in hand. I think the last one, not to repeat the ones you guys have already given, is show people who you are. Show people your personality type, the type of person that you are, and your values and your beliefs. Because people also invest in the person too. They invest in the results that you're achieving, of course, but they also invest in the person. And they might look at you and think, there's 1,001 PTs out there that are doing all these transformations, but maybe what distinguishes you between everyone else is they like you. They like your personality. They like how you talk. They like how you present yourself. So I think that's also another aspect too, and especially in the day and age we're in, where everyone is showing their life on their social media. I think it's really, really important to do that too, especially in the day and age we're in, if you're not already established, for sure.
Hey, MT, before you say goodbye, can you hold up on the screen for everyone our new logo?
Yeah, can, if they haven't already seen it in the
It was the thumbnail, but yeah, that's cool.
TMG. Yeah. Going to start branding it, making some merchant stuff, maybe some podcast stuff, maybe some
That's pretty
slogans,
cool, man. I like it. It's exciting.
Some cool things happening this year for us three boys, but we'll get into all of that. All right, that's it. Thanks for a good potty. Thank you for all the questions. We had some really, really good scenarios. We just asked that people give us as much context as they possibly can. Obviously, don't write an essay, but give us as much context as you possibly can. We love helping everyone out. And again, just reach out if you ever need anything, anyone. But yeah, we appreciate you listening and your support.
Take care, guys.
That's it. Have a good one.
Okay.